Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. It's hump day. Make sure you hump someone today. At least their leg, if not. So, once again, I want to give a big thank you and shout out to Big Jim Finch. Really cool news network or something like that. He has acquired and posted publicly a copy of the plea agreement that was signed and entered by Myers and Metcalf and Stiles. So it's done and dusted. I was saying yesterday it's done and dusted. I mean, there's no way they have a sentencing hearing set if the plea agreement hasn't been accepted. So that it's just done. Interesting. Well, first of all, I just want to point out to all the Lane Myers fans who are just coping right now so fucking hard. He pled guilty. He didn't plead nolo. He didn't say that, I'm not saying I'm innocent or guilty, but I'm saying that, I think that the state would be able to convict me. He didn't do that. He didn't make an Alford plea, which is very similar, but where he pleads guilty but maintains his innocence. He didn't do that either. What he did is he pled guilty. He pled guilty. He said there was a crime. I did the crime. I am a criminal. I am guilty of committing a crime. That's what a guilty plea means. I committed a crime. Literally, he's saying I committed the crimes of stalking and aggravated harassment. He's saying I committed those crimes. So for every one of you retards out there who are still posting in my comment section, what crime did he commit? He just called her one time. What crime? Why won't anybody tell me what crime it is? He pled guilty to 2 crimes, both felonies, stalking and aggravated harassment. And the only reason why the other crimes he wasn't convicted of is because in exchange for pleading to those 2 crimes, the prosecution dropped the remaining charges. That doesn't mean he didn't do them, but he acknowledged in writing, signed his name to it, that he committed at least those 2 crimes. So your argument is stupid. You're stupid. You should feel bad. You should be ashamed, and you should go neck yourself. Because literally, you're not smart enough to pass your genes on to the next generation. And if you already have, then woe be society. Now, I was pretty shocked at the terms of the plea agreement, because one of the things that he did is your boy, your intrepid, intellectual, better than any attorney in the state of Arizona, Lane Myers, waived all of his appeal rights. All of them, including any appeal for the sentencing, which hasn't even happened yet. So it doesn't matter what happens at sentencing, the court could get up and sentence him for something that is outside. If the court sentenced him for 10 years when the maximum is 4.5, Lane Myers has waived his right to appeal it. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen. I would never counsel my client to make that deal. I would have negotiated the terms of those. I would have attempted to preserve appeal rights for the First Amendment issue, so that, if that is determined by a court of appeals that there is a First Amendment issue there, then it could undo the conviction. I would have tried to negotiate that, and I would have also tried to negotiate the not having him waive the appeal for any sentencing. I'm shocked. I'm shocked that he agreed to it. I still think it's a good deal. I mean, when you weigh it out, because his odds of winning on the First Amendment issue are minuscule, because essentially he'd have to get up to the Arizona Supreme Court or pass that to the United States Supreme Court to get that particular statute found to be unconstitutional, because there's already a Court of Appeal statute that said essentially that statute is constitutional. So I mean, his odds were negligible. So, so what's coming up is a sentencing hearing. Now, normally, generally speaking, I'm going to guess it's this way for Arizona. Lane Myers will have the right to present evidence and to present witnesses and to cross-examine witnesses at a sentencing hearing. I assume Arizona is this way. It just doesn't seem like they would deviate, or at least too much on that, unless there's some sort of an agreement or whatever. So but on the other side, they've only set aside an hour from what I've seen for the sentencing hearing. So my best guess is that Lane doesn't have anybody that he's going to call. It doesn't sound like he's going to be calling his girlfriend/wife to testify on his behalf. Normally, you'd want to have, like an AA sponsor come and testify on your behalf. Your pastor, priest, cleric, imam, whatever, come in and testify on your behalf. Mothers don't really carry a lot of weight. I mean, everybody has a sobbing mother that testifies, but like if you're enrolled in college, having a professor come and testify on your behalf. Oh yeah, he's a good student, he's doing great, blah blah blah. Right? You want to have upstanding people in society come in and testify on your behalf. On the other side, what the prosecution probably wants to do, because the rules of evidence are a little bit, the range of evidence that can be introduced is a little bit more relaxed than what would be able to be introduced at trial, generally speaking, unless Arizona is some freak that has the same relevancy requirements. But like the prosecutor could, like, for example, call in that O'Reilly's cashier or whatever that Lane Myers broke down in a video. They could present that video as evidence just to show the kind of person he is, and his volatility, and the need to remove him from society for the protection of society. They could possibly bring in witnesses or video related to the incident in the city hall meeting where Lane Myers allegedly disrupted the city council meeting or whatever. Allegedly, I haven't gotten into that one. Don't at me, bro. I don't care. But that's so the prosecutor would be, in theory, presenting evidence and bringing in witnesses to testify as to things that would get the judge to give a harsher sentence, and Lane Myers wants to bring in witnesses and evidence that would get the judge to give him a lighter sentence. My gut instinct at this point is that really it's just going to be the witness testifying, and maybe Lane Myers testifying on his own behalf. Honestly, I don't really think it's going to be that much. And again, I would, for Lane Myers' benefit, I would at least like to have had his girlfriend testify. If I was Lane Myers' attorney, I'd be like, look, bro, I get it. You don't go to church, so you don't have a priest, pastor, imam, whatever. You don't go to college. You don't have a professor. You're not in AA. You probably should be, but you're not in AA or NA, so you don't have a sponsor for that. At least can we get your girlfriend in here to say something nice about you? Something nice. But I doubt that's going to happen. From my understanding, she hasn't participated in this at all, so she might be done with him. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know what's going on between them. Yeah. So, like I was saying earlier, there's been a lot of people, a lot of Lane Myers supporters coping in my comment section, and I just want to tell you all that you're dumb and you're wrong. There is not going to be an appeal. I mean, in theory, Lane Myers could appeal, but since he's waived his rights to appeal, that's probably a defense to the appeal itself, and so I don't even know if he would be able to successfully appeal to get to the actual meat and potatoes of any appealable issues because of that waiver. It's not going to go to the federal district court. In order to even do that, Lane Myers would have to, he could in theory appeal a First Amendment issue. In theory, up through, I mean, again, there's a waiver. So the likelihood of this happening is hovering like almost at 0.000001. I mean, it's just, your odds of winning the lottery 3 times in a row are better than the odds of him getting this. But in theory, it is technically possible. He could appeal all the way, the First Amendment issue, all the way up through the Arizona. He could appeal to the Arizona Court of Appeals. He could petition to the Arizona Supreme Court, and then either they say no to the petition or they hear the petition and they deny his relief. Then he could, in theory, petition to the United States Supreme Court. That's one technically possible but never going to happen way of him getting it to district court. The only other way for him to get into district court would be on he could petition the district court on a writ of habeas, but that would not be successful because he pled guilty. So the only other way to get into district court would be, federal district court, would be through a civil lawsuit, but he'd have to get that guilty plea set aside first, and that's not going to happen. I mean, so just all this cope about him going to federal district court is not happening. It's not happening. Sorry, it's not happening. There's cope about a judicial inquiry coming. That's not happening. There is a committee in Arizona, from my understanding, that deals with complaints against the judiciary. A judicial inquiry is not a substitution for an appeal. If you have an issue with a ruling made by a judge, your remedy is to appeal it. It's not to get the judge recused. It's not to file a judicial inquiry. Where any complaints about Judge Metcalf or any of the other judges are going to go is into the circular file. They're not going to do anything. I mean, they'll read them. They'll be like, there's nothing here. There's nothing here. There's a bunch of sovsits who are really super duper upset that their sovsit guru got arrested, charged, and then pled guilty. There's nothing here. There is no actual judicial failing by Metcalf or any of the other judges. All of the judges in every hearing that I watched were professional. They were acting within the bounds of the law. I mean, I disagree with the civil judges for the injunction against harassment. I disagree with his legal reasoning on how he got to his conclusion. And I don't like the fact that he used unpublished cases to support his decision. And I don't like the fact that he used cases that dealt with the criminal harassment definition and statute instead of the civil harassment definition and statute to grant the injunction. But he did not do anything that violated the judicial canons of the judicial whatever of responsibility. So that's not going anywhere. Sorry. For all the people who can't figure out, like, what crime? People are still asking me, what crime? You only called her once. What crime? He pled guilty to 2 crimes, which means that he acknowledged it was a crime and that he committed it. So there's your crime. Talk to Lane Myers. He did it. For everybody saying that he was coerced into doing it, before he signed that plea agreement, there was a colloquy between him and the judge, where the judge asked him if he knowingly, intelligently, voluntarily signed it, if there was any promises made that aren't reflected in that plea agreement, if there was any outside undue influence, if there was any fraud, duress, anything like that. And to all of those things, Lane Myers himself, your guru, had to have said, I did it knowingly, intelligently, voluntarily. There was no other promises made besides what is reflected in the agreement. There was no undue influence, no fraud, no duress, nothing like that. And for those of you who are trying to redefine things like, oh, he was in prison or he was in jail without bond, that's torture. It's not torture. Torture has a legal definition. You won't find any judge anywhere who's going to say that just being held in jail pending trial is torture. You're not going to find one because there's no legal definition of torture that matches that description. And last, but also probably the least, yesterday in my video, I said like the starting point for all of this is his phone call to the wife of the prosecutor. Nothing beyond that is relevant at all. Period. Nothing beyond that is relevant. There's no legal relevance at all to anything that proceeded prior to that. There's the only things that are legally of any relevance start with his call to the wife of the prosecutor for no legitimate reason whatsoever. And I got some dumbass who's like, well, if she called the prosecutor, that means there must be a prosecution going. Well, what about that? Courts don't play 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. There is no legal relationship between that woman, the victim, and the legal proceedings going on against Lane Myers. She's not a party to it. She's not a victim. She's not a witness. She's not an expert. She is in no relation to that proceeding. There's no legal connection between her and that proceeding. She couldn't be called to testify. She wasn't a percipient witness. There was no reason to have her make a witness statement because she wasn't there to see anything. She has no knowledge, no firsthand percipient knowledge of any of the facts. She's not there's no relationship between her and that case. And that's what I'm saying. Like I get it. People are really stupid and they can't break things into relevant chunks. The current case against Lane Myers that he pled guilty to 2 counts on starts with the phone call. Starts with it. If he had just made the one phone call, he wouldn't be convicted of anything right now. He wouldn't have committed a crime if he'd just done the one phone call. But they needed everything afterwards. He made videos that incited people to do things. Yeah, they did it on their own, except you can't get around the whole but for Lane Myers calling her out. But for Lane Myers posting her information. I know it's public. I know it was already publicly posted. Don't at me, bro. But if Lane Myers hadn't put that information into his video to his followers who understand the context and understand the relationship between the woman and the prosecutor that Lane Myers thinks is unfair, but for Lane's desire to have his followers punish her for having the audacity to be married to a prosecutor who Lane doesn't like, but for, they wouldn't have called. And so any attempt at defense is saying, well, Lane isn't the one who called, ignores that he's not charged with calling her more than once. He's charged with basically harassing her by getting other people to call her. And he did that by putting her phone number out and her name out in the context that he did in the videos that he made, with the subtext being that she's a bad person because she's married to the prosecutor, and putting thumbnails out there showing her to be a bad person, and putting videos of her kids up. Oh, she publicly posted it. That doesn't mean that you get to post it in a negative context. That doesn't mean that you get to post it in an attempt to harass her and to have your followers harass her over it. I don't know why this is so hard for people to understand. It is hard for me to think like a Lane Myers supporter who has a sub 85 IQ. It's very hard for me to put myself in your position. And so I apologize that I fail to communicate adequately to you in a way that gets you to understand these things. Anyway, I'm going to get down off my high horse. I got a lot to do today. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.